everybody. It's getting cooler outside. Temperature's dropping a little bit. Dark's coming on. Thought we'd bring in the last of our junkers. that's just what they are. We got an 86 TRX. One of the first years of the Fourtrax year model or name. 200 SX, not to be confused with the 250 SX. This is kind of your second iteration of the four-wheeler. The last video we had the 200, the TRX 200, which is really a throwback to the three-wheeler. This is an 84. That's an 86. 2 years difference here. You can see the styling change. This is actually pretty significant changes made on this engine. Though they are both electric start, we see here we have the starter's been moved to the back side of the head. And so to me, this kind of sets things up. The 125M, second generation, was done this way. Your 85, 86, big reds, 87s, 88s. The starter was moved to this location. This is different. But this makes me think of the 230 CRF, even though that hasn't come out and you know, it won't be out for another 40 years. That's what it reminds me of. This is actually a lot like the Fat Cat engine that you see on the two-wheel mini bikes. The starter's been relocated to the backside. It's electric, it's chain drive, it's electric start, it's chain drive. A lot of similarities. You have a pull rope backup. No longer do you have the kickstart backup. So Honda was doing some things. This is a good option if you have a Fat Cat and need an engine, because those were closer to the 200X engines. They were kickstart bikes. But if you wanted to adapt this, you could make this fit into a Fat Cat. You could also put it in. The head is a little taller on this motor. This would also work in your second gen 200Xs, which would make a nice mod or retrofit, if you will. You could add electric start to your 200X. Exhaust is pretty much would interchange over from those two bikes. Just a really interesting platform. So we're gonna go and we're gonna do a will it run here on this. I don't know anything about it. It came in a lot of 3 bikes, and only 2 of them are Hondas, so that's all we're gonna focus on. But I want to take you through, I've kind of skipped over, and I know I've kind of skipped over a few steps. Some things are obvious to me and maybe I take for granted, but maybe they're not to you. So let's say you get a wild hair and you got a friend or a relative that's got one of these hanging out in the barn or in the bushes somewhere. What do you need to do? What do you need to do first before you even consider dragging it out of wherever it's been hiding? This one's clearly been hiding somewhere bad. It's rust is really bad. But when you're appraising a bike, when you're looking at it, you know, you got to figure out what are you willing to pay for it. Well, look who's here. Chloe's here, everybody. Hey, Chloe. Yes. Come say hi. Chloe's been barking out there. I heard the other day that if you hear a dog barking off at the distance, they're taking roll. And so if your dog answers that dog, then they're just saying, I'm here. Something to think about. So anyways, the first things you want to look at is overall condition. Of course, the plastics at this age of bike are going to be really rough. Rust is always going to be a concern, especially here in the South. Look at this gas tank. Metal gas tanks are just, if they've been left outside, they can pretty much just write them off. So you want to start considering, is a gas tank available? What's salvageable and what's not? First thing I like to do is I'm going to check the oil. I'm hoping that there's some in it. I'm hoping that it's black and not brown. You saw the oil we pulled out of that other bike. Knowing that they drove that without the starter, that makes perfect sense. All right, we've got oil. It's black. It's low, but it's black. And that's a good sign. So that's promising. The next thing I want to do after I verify that there's oil in the engine is I want to spin it over. Either, you know, by hand, pull rope, or by you know, kickstart. Just want to turn it over slowly. Don't go romping on it really hard or really fast right out of the gate. You got to remember, old girl's been asleep for a long time. So the next thing I want to do is I want to check Okay. You hear that? Boom, boom, boom. You hear that? Okay. So that boom boom sound, I don't know how to I don't know how to explain it any more than that. That little boom boom, that deep sound, that's compression being made inside the cylinder, and then the sound that it makes as it comes out of the exhaust. So that's good. What does it tell us? It tells us that it's trying to make compression. We don't know if it's enough to run or not, but it does have some compression. That means that the valves are cycling, they're opening, they're closing. We know that the exhaust is relatively unobstructed because we were able to hear that sound. If it was full of dirt daubers and wasp nests and other things, you couldn't hear anything. It would just be silent. You wouldn't hear that deep sound. So at this point, looking at this bike, I'm ready to go for the next step. And the next step for me is I want to tear into it. I want to check for spark. That's always the next thing. After assessing the overall condition, I want to look at spark. We can see here somebody's been very creative. They've extended the oh my goodness. As you can see, somebody's been very creative here, and they have extended our power cables. We have our hot, which is red or pink, with some nice electrical tape there. There you go. All right. They've cut the fuse out of it, so that's, you don't have to worry about blowing fuses now. So they've taken care of that for us. And ground is green, so that's good if you're in your house doing electrical work there. That's good. Carburetor's intact. Looks like there is a fuel filter on it. See that little red filter in there? I see that the similarities between this and the last bike, though the plastics are different, the tanks are very similar. Oh wow, they really screwed the pooch on this. Pretty sure these are not supposed to be 7/16. Yeah, that makes sense. The previous owner, he just wanted to use all the tools in his toolbox. So far we've had SAE standard, a flathead, and a Phillips in the first 4 bolts. Sometimes it's hard to determine what is bolted on and what is rusted on. Now we can get a look at the differences here in the top end. If you look close, this is a lot more like the 86, 87 200X. Ooh, that's not good. So here we have some some homemade work here. We have probably an intake that's broken off of this bike. I believe that those are special to this bike. The 2nd gen 200X. Before you go turning the bike over and just guessing, you want to be sure that you're not going to suck up anything in the air box. It's always one of the first things you want to check once you get to the point where you want to start checking for spark and turning the engine over with some, with some speed to it. You want to check your air box. You know that the air filter is probably trashed. You don't know what else is in here. We have an air filter. It's actually pretty, it's crusty. When I touch it, it compresses and then stays. So that's kind of funny. It's kind of like, it's kind of weird. Got a spider house, that's always good. Oh yeah, she's just gonna fall apart. Yep. So let's try to get that out in one piece. It's just a lot easier to clean up that way. Our fuel line broke and split when we were pulling the tank off. But we talk about value. We talk about, you know, these bikes that are in the woods and just, you know, left for dead, but people need these parts. I talked about in other videos about the guys that part these bikes out, three-wheelers mostly, but these early generation four-wheelers are becoming more and more popular. They're cheap, people find them, they can get them running relatively expensive, but for the guys that want to put them back together and really use them, they want the original parts. They need a seat pan. You can't ride one without a seat. Airbox lid covers. These seat pans were plastic, so they were very easy. There's a seat pan for it right there. You could you could rebuild that seat relatively inexpensively. There's little things, nuts and bolts and things like that, that have tremendous amount of value to someone else. Maybe this bike doesn't run, but that doesn't mean you've wasted your time out here looking and seeing what you have. We're assessing this bike. I know for a fact that engine is valuable, even if it doesn't run. If nothing else, if everything else is thrown away, that engine alone, because it's 200 cc's, because it will fit a 200X, it has reverse and electric start. Two things that none of the 200X bikes had. That is a direct bolt-in to the second gen 200X, as opposed to if you were to try to retrofit a modern, you know, aftermarket engine or even a CFR engine. This will bolt right into those bikes, and you could take the wiring harness off of this, the battery tray. I mean, there's so many things you could take off of this and adapt to a 200X. So let's move forward, and now we're going to try to check for spark, and we're going to see what our throttle is doing. So what I like to do is check the thumb throttle and listen. It's moving, but it's coming up. You can hear it come up as I push in, and then when I let off, it's just going real slow back down. So more than likely, it's just gummed up. You see someone here has put a hose clamp on here, and the reason they did that is because this casing has broken loose from the end of the sleeve. They've shortened it, they've modified it, or it's broken, and they're trying to keep it from sliding. Every time they push the throttle, the casing is wanting to move, and so that's what this is for. Little things like that that you run across, you can look at and go, that's not the way that's supposed to be. So if this bike were to run again, certainly would be looking at a throttle cable. There we go, 2 hands. Now Honda was kind of good about putting framework in the way. Now that slide is not as gummed up as I expected. I'm going to clean it, and hopefully we can put it back in there. This intake is really questionable. I'm not going to mess with it. Hopefully it's going to seal. We're going to find out. We're going to run a compression check next while we're here. That's not factory. Speaker wire, not factory. Though that would be nice. You put a little radio on here. So when you take your plug out, take it out and look at it. You know, it's the best indicator to kind of tell you how these bikes were running the last time they ran. These engines were really good engines. I would be interested myself in to just pull the engine out and hold on to it. All right, so there's our plug. Doesn't look like it's got a lot of life on it, so more than likely, I would probably say that someone tried to revive this bike. I'm gonna go run it in the wire wheel. I'll be right back. So I've cleaned up our plug, just ran it on the wire wheel, careful not to damage it. I see that the coil wire is right here, it's handy. I am gonna open up this little bracket that's holding it. So now we can get this coil wire up top here, and we can all take a look at it. Be careful with your coil wires. You know, they're 40 years old too. If you feel one that spins real easy, you know, there's a good opportunity or a good possibility that it's not making any contact anymore. So because we've checked our oil, and we are fixing to run a compression check. Right now we're going to check for spark. Since we have the plug out, now's the time to do it. All right, we have spark, just like that. You get good spark. The very first pull we had spark. So we're doing good. That also tells us, if you noticed earlier in the walk around, we have no key for this bike. So someone has already been in here, see the duct tape, and somebody's already bypassed the key. Now, if I didn't have spark at this point, then the next thing I would have done was bypass the key. I showed you how to do that in another video. Refer back to that one. That would actually be the TRX 200 video. I would bypass the key before I said or called that we didn't have any spark. You want to make sure that the key's not killing it. Make sure that your switches aren't in the off position. I checked that before I pulled. So all of this is good. This is in the, and don't sit here and just switch it. If it's in the center, leave it there. Same for the key. That's always good. Here's our choke. We've got no sight in our sight glass, but that throttle, if you look now with the throttle out, see how much resistance, see how it actually works quite well. I don't think it's quite going all the way out, but it's very close. I think we're in good shape there. I think what we just need to do is put a little cleaner down in the carb there. So we've got spark, we've got throttle that opens and shuts, so that's good. And we know we have some compression. Let's find out how much compression we have. Again, I've got a link to these compression testers. You can pick them up Amazon. They're just an invaluable tool, they really are. Now you could, because we have spark, you could have put the plug back in and you could have just went for it. You could have sprayed some carb cleaner in there and see if it would have hit. And that's certainly a way to do it. I'm not going to say it's not. I've done them hundreds of them that way. But if you really want to know, like in this situation, I would be considered selling this. Am I selling an engine that's healthy, or am I selling an engine that's not healthy? Is it so good that I want to keep it for a future project, or is it something that runs but needs a rebuild? And so maybe I'd pass that on to somebody else. This is how you make an informed decision before you go spending a lot of money. Aside from buying this, we haven't spent any money yet. We've already found out a lot about it. So again, I've got the carburetor open here because there's no slide in it. So I don't have to hold the accelerator open. I am going to make sure that the choke is off. And I can feel that the butterfly in the back of the carb is in the flat position, not in the closed position. And with that said, I'm going to give it about 4 or 5 good pulls, and we'll see what our reading is going to be. Okay, so we got 120 PSI on our compression tester. Outstanding. If you were listening close, you could actually hear the spark popping on that spark plug, which means it's a really strong spark. So now, the only thing left to do is I want to verify that I can turn the engine off. I know a lot of guys skip that because they get excited, and I used to. You know, it's just a coming of age thing. So I'm going to take our clean plug now. I'm going to put it back in. Remember, this is the same plug we started with. Again, we haven't spent any money. I'm going to reroute our coil wire back down, our plug wire back down, and then hook it back up. All right, so now what we want to do is we're going to give it a little juice and see what happens. Yeah, that sounds about right. Let's do that. All right, I'm going to clean this slide up a little bit. I'm just going to spray it off here with some PB Blaster. I just happen to have it in my hand. Carb cleaner probably would have been better. But old gas gets a varnish on it, and that varnish gets sticky from sitting as it starts to break down and separate and do all the things that bad gas does. Be sure when you put this in, be sure that slide is lined up. If you're sitting on the bike, 3 o'clock, okay, 12 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 6 o'clock. And that will line up perfectly with your fast idle screw. And when you get it just right, and it may take a few times, because a lot of times it wants to spin and twist on you and not line up. I talked to a fella just the other day. He had put his in and he was careful, but you know, it happens. So I don't have any gas in this carburetor yet. I did go get my little jug here of fuel. I am gonna give it some starter fluid and see if it busts off or not. I think I'm going to the store, so what I'm gonna be doing. Let's see what we got. You ready? Well, you can't get much better than that. Oh, wow. First pull. Y'all seen that, right? First pull. Okay, so now we've got to go forward. That is just too promising. First pull. Y'all ain't gonna believe that that's real. Well, it is. So I don't know how to prove it any other way. You see that there's no gas in here. I haven't tipped my jug up. I just hooked it up. Let's get this carburetor freed up before we get crazy, because we are going to make some smoke, y'all. That's all it takes. Those little wins, y'all. Little wins, big victories. It's going back down, but it's not making that pop sound I'm always telling y'all to look for. So, knowing that ahead of time, let's turn the idle way down on it to start with. And let's be ready to kill it. I'm going to give it some gas for the first time here. All right, we got gas in our little cheapy fuel filter here. Look for leaks. You know, these carbs are dry. The seals in them are dry. All of it. Everything is dry. So that being said, I'm going to clean up before this thing tries to take off. I'm going to take a rag. I'm going to keep it handy. It's always good to have a couple of ways to turn a bike off. If this bike were to run away, idle too high, I could suffocate it with a rag here over the intake. I can use the kill switch. We know the key's not hooked up. Hopefully the kill switch is. So that's what we're counting on. You can always pull the spark plug wire too. It's always different ways. Now look at this. You see that fuel dumping out of the car right there? All right, so we know right now, already, we know that the needle in the seat is not working for the carb. As it's taking fuel, it's overfilling and flooding back into the air filter. So we're gonna have probably a flooded condition, or it's gonna take off and run. We got a 50-50 shot here. I've had very limited success tapping on the carburetor. That's what I'm going to attempt here. Basically, you're just trying to shake it or vibrate it. You're not really trying to move it or anything. Again, dealing with an intake that's held together with glue, I don't want to do too much. Let's see what we got. Is locked up. I think it'll idle. I don't think it'll run. I think it'll idle though. Let's see. Screwdriver. Had one. Lost it. I could lose the most tools. Any of y'all like that? I can literally not move and lose a screwdriver. I don't know how that happens. well, there you go. Will it run 2022? It's rough. It needs a carb cleaning, something awful. Needs a throttle cable. It's the next thing. It did run. It shifted first and second. When I turned it off, you heard that. So we know that is going to need a one-way bearing, and that's probably what killed this bike. It probably needs clutches, and which is like 40 bucks, and a one-way bearing is another 25. We have no idea about brakes. You can go ahead and count on brakes. Yeah, I know it's going to need wheel bearings in the rear. When I pushed it in here, you could just hear they were just barking like a dog. By no means is this thing trail worthy. I get them to run. You know, to me, it's just a challenge. It's somebody couldn't get it to run, and so I'm going to come behind them and I'm going to see if I can figure out why. And it's a puzzle. It's a puzzle. There's people that you know make puzzles, and there's the other hobbies. My hobby is trying to make dead things run again. These old Hondas just don't want to give up. I mean, they're just built in an era when things were made to a higher standard than they are today, and that's a shame. And it's not everything. No, it's not. But these bikes have stood the test of time. They've been neglected for literally 20 years outside, and you can bring them back. This video is going to be, I've got an hour and a half tops out here. I really haven't edited anything that you haven't seen, and I'm just barely past 37 minutes on my counter here. So is it a good purchase? Depends on what you're going to do with it. If you're going to restore it, no, it's not worth restoring. You want to throw some brakes on it, run around the yard with it, pull a little trailer, you know, clean a carb, do the things that we said. It needs clutches, put a key ignition in it. And yeah, it's a good purchase. Learning how to work on something, the pride that comes with fixing it yourself. And every time you get on it, you're going to have a smile because you fixed it with your own hands, not somebody else's. And it's probably older than half the audience. This thing's, I mean, it's an 86. It's not older than me. But there are some of you out there that, you know who I'm talking to. That's an antique. So, thanks for watching. I appreciate it. These are a blast. Again, when you find one of these bikes, just because you can get it to run does not mean it's ready to hit the trail. This bike needs a ton of work. The engine is the value here. Again, electric start, which I didn't show you, and this bike has reverse. It's cable operated like the Big Reds and the SXs. You push this button here, what's left of a button, and it picks up a secondary. You see when I open this, there's a secondary lever. See that secondary cable in here? And what that does is that controls a lever on the bottom of the engine here, way on the bottom. Same place as your 250 class, this lever right here, and that controls, there's a safety, so you don't accidentally go from first to reverse. You use the same foot shifter, but you override a safety here on the handlebars. And that's what makes that cool. And that's what makes this such a compact system. You don't have that sub-transmission hanging out the side like you do on the 84. Look how good the frame is on this one. You don't see hardly any rust except for right up in here, and that's all surface. Oops, sorry. This frame is in really good shape. This would not be a bad bike to salvage. The racks look terrible. The plastic is terrible. But if you really analyze one of these bikes, look up in there. See how nice that swing arm is? It's just nice, evenly gray. It's certainly dirty, but all the rust is superficial. It's all on the top. You got a little bit here, but what do you think? What's the chances, fellas? How lucky are we? No, hey, I don't know now. Oh, it's like gold right there. Is it new though? Is it new? Well, it's crusty. Oh, strike two. Got an old crusty used spark plug. Oh well, it's still an NGK. I'd still take it over a new Champion. We got some zip ties. So no original toolbox here. Somebody used it, but that's okay. Okay, that's it. 2022 Will It Run number 2 Fourtrax 200 SX. It's been sitting at least 10 years. That was the one that sat next to it, to give you an idea. That's what's left of it. It is a dog, but it's got a lot of really valuable parts. Somebody put brand new tires on this thing. Look at this. Look at those tires. They still got the nipples on them. They thought they were going to bring this back. And as you see, they weren't far away from it. I think probably the carburetor stopped them in their tracks, and the clutches is probably what sidelined this bike. And that terrible paint job. Oh my goodness. Please don't paint your bikes. I will give you a teaser. So that red seat does not go to the tractor, though that would be nice. That's going in the Odyssey. There it is, 1986 Fourtrax 200 SX. Will it run? Yeah, she'll run. She needs a lot of work, but she runs. Thank you as always for watching. Cheap bike. Even if it doesn't run, you're gonna learn something. You're gonna walk away with a better understanding of mechanics just from trying. And you're never, ever gonna make one run if you don't try. That's all I can tell you. So thank you for watching. I appreciate it. I want y'all to know that the Odyssey video has just surpassed 37,000 views. That's a record for me. That's double what the 250R video did, and I thought that was gonna do something. And it's doing fine, but almost 40,000 views for an Odyssey. So that's because of y'all. Thank you. Thank you for watching it, and I'm glad you like it, and I hope you learned something, and I hope you enjoyed it. And thank you for sharing it. That's how all this works. Your likes and shares promotes the channel. So thank you. Take care. Good night.